All right, we're started.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Conversations in Energy Storage Integration. This is day one of this seminar, An Introduction to Energy Storage Integration. We have a great lineup of speakers here today to discuss how collaborative research is critical to addressing challenges in energy storage. Before we get started, I'm just going to go over these few housekeeping items. You're probably listening in using your computer's speaker system. And if you want to dial in, I believe there is an option for that. We are taking questions today via the Q&A function at the bottom of your control panel, but we do encourage you to focus on saving questions for the panel discussion at the end of the session. We are recording today's webinar, and you'll receive a follow-up email within a few weeks with a link to view the recording. With that, I'd like to introduce today's moderator, Dr. Ahmad Pasaran. Ahmad has worked at NREL on thermal engineering of energy systems, energy efficient technologies, and batteries for electrified vehicles over the last 37 years. Between 2007 and 2016, he was the NREL Energy Storage Group Manager. He was on off-site assignment with DOE's Vehicle Technologies Office in 2016 through 2018. He currently supports Vehicle Technologies Office battery R&D team with battery processing, manufacturing, solid electrolyte, and low cobalt cathode projects. All right, Ahmad, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks for your introduction. This is Ahmad Pasaran, as mentioned. I would like to welcome all of you from behalf of NREL and also energy conversion and energy storage systems. And I think the purpose of this introduction is to kind of, as you can see, all the speakers providing different perspective from different organizations on the energy storage and how they should be integrated, or how the opportunity to integrating them together so that the sum of them to be larger than each one. And I think the energy storage technology, each technology like thermal or electrochemical has made a lot of progress. And I think we got to the point that kind of maybe we can, if you hybridize them and integrate them, we get more out of them, right, for the grid and decarbonization of the grid, and also achieving the climate change for our future. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Maggie Mann, the speaker, and let's share. Okay, Rebecca, do you have the slides to share from the morning? Or?
Yeah, sorry, I thought you had them.
So
I'll pull them up.
Yeah,
I have them, Rebecca. I can throw them up there.
Okay.
Yeah, so Maggie is kind of our manager for mobility infrastructure and impact analysis at NREL. She has been at NREL for a while, for a long time. Has been a good colleague of mine, and she has background in chemical engineering, and she now leads the effort for analysis and particularly some of different technologies, particularly batteries. So my introduction to energy storage integration. So Maggie, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ahmad. And good morning to everyone. It's quite snowy here, and I am super glad to be working from home. Something I don't say every day these days. But I hope you're well where you are, and I'm glad that we were able to start this conversation. I just wanted to confirm that what you're seeing is the presentation mode for my presentation.
Yes,
yep,
looks good.
Okay, and if I do that, does it switch to the not presentation mode?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so I won't do that. All right, thank you. All right, so Jen Kurtz asked me to just show a few slides to get us kicked off and oriented toward the need for integrated energy storage. We know that we have a lot of goals that need to be met with our current challenges facing us, particularly for decarbonization, energy efficiency, demand for greater amounts of power and the integration of the transportation sector with our electricity sector. We have grid resilience challenges. And of course, we have the growing needs for repairing and upgrading our infrastructure around energy systems. And we can't reliably and consistently meet these needs with our current energy system. So we know that there are multiple technologies available for energy storage at different timescales. There's the short duration, very quick response batteries that are available, all the way to very long timescale duration, long duration energy storage technologies, as well as many that are emerging. But what we also know is that isolated technology development for not only the for the individual energy storage technologies, but also for the clean energy technologies we're going to rely on, won't be enough, and that we need to integrate these technologies and integrate energy storage with these clean energy technologies in order to solve the challenges that are in front of us. ARES is a research platform at NREL that is seeking to accelerate the transition to this modern energy system. Located at our Flatirons campus between Golden and Boulder, it has space and power levels available to integrate systems at scales that really matter in order to test them in real world conditions in integrated ways that may be seen in multiple locations across multiple timescales out there in the real world as we move to this future modern energy system. We also know that these challenges are important and multidimensional, and that talking with the, sorry, let me just get rid of that, making sure that conversations exist between government, industry, and academia are critical for making sure that the collaborative research is formed and addressed to address these challenges. And we think the ARES, as well as platforms such as this seminar, can facilitate some of that engagement and collaboration. So this seminar series has an objective of increasing impact by not only sharing information, research, technology information, but also making those connections and informing our future work. We hope to develop not only collaborations, but also partnerships in order to bring together the best minds, the best technologies, and the best institutions. Thank you very much. I look forward to participating in today's seminar and tomorrow's discussion as well.
Thank you, Maggie. I appreciate it. Put it the perspective right, and so that we can do discussion. Our next speaker we're going to talk is Eric Aish, and sorry if I made the mistake wrong. So he's the director of the energy system and component at the Office of Electricity in the Department of Energy. Eric is a project leader also for Energy Storage Grand Challenge. It's kind of very important cross collaboration across DOE, and purpose of accelerating program development of conversation utilization of next generation of energy storage technologies. And I think he has looked at all different technologies under his Grand Challenge. Previously, he was at a number of bank companies and also Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Eric's going to talk, I'm sure, talk about Grand Challenge and long duration storage energy Earthshots. So Eric, please go ahead.
Great. Thank you for that invitation, and thank you for the chance to share some thoughts about how DOE is addressing the need for sort of a step change improvement in energy storage technologies. Can I make sure my screen appears okay? I got a full screen for my slide.
Looks great.
Great, thank you. Great, so just continuing on the theme of collaboration that Maggie introduced for us, I'm going to talk about how DOE is looking at energy storage and collaboration. So I think this is no not news to anyone on this call, but I think it's useful to help set up some of the magnitude of the challenges that we face. So if we look at the 2035 and 2050 decarbonization goals for the administration, getting there will require massive amounts of more storage or clean, flexible capacity. So anywhere from 40 times to 100 times more than we have today. And as Maggie mentioned, storage includes a range of functions provided by many technologies. So DOE storage work is found across more than half a dozen labs and half a dozen offices and over a dozen labs. And successful storage deployment is going to require the full range of R&D, deployment, manufacturing, and institutional support. All of these need to occur as a package and coordinated with each other in order for us to grow this industry fast enough. And it's really going to require, within DOE, collaboration across traditional DOE boundaries, across offices, and then across institutional boundaries with the industry. So to give people sort of an idea of what this magnitude is, if you look at what we have today, it's actually quite, give me a second. No. It's almost daunting. So this very thin dark blue line is to scale the batteries that were deployed at the end of 2020. So that's about 3.5 gigawatts, 8.7 gigawatt hours. So on average, they're about 3 hours and change in duration. And this longer blue line is this pump storage deployed in the US as of 2020. So 22 gigawatts, 550 gigawatt hours, so on average about 25 hours. If you look at business as usual scenarios of what might be built in the relatively medium-term future, 2030, you'd see a fairly sizable growth in batteries. So depending on which analyst you're looking at, you could have 65 gigawatts or 235 gigawatt hours of batteries. That represents almost a 30 times increase in what we have now. And then if everything currently in the pump storage development pipeline is built, then we would get something on the order of 50 gigawatts and 1,300 gigawatts. So 2.5 times over what we have today. Depending on where, who you are looking at in terms of decarbonization scenarios, we might need anywhere from 300 to 800 gigawatts of storage. That represents 1,200 to 4,800 gigawatt hours. So that is fairly, like many, many times more than we have today. And then if you're looking at 2050, when seasonal storage becomes even more important, some models model this as a clean dispatchable technology. Others explicitly model it as an energy storage technology. You're talking, again, another several hundred gigawatt hours of very, very long duration technology. Now, the point of showing these requirements is that it's really pointing to the technical need for a portfolio of storage technology. So you have a subset of the capacity that's going to be it's going to be cycled daily. So less than 12 hours in duration. It's going to address most of the diurnal variations in the load shape, the net load shape. And when you're talking about this type of duration, there will be a lot of benefits for being located closer to load, especially for resilience, in that the vast majority of interruptions are of a short enough duration that this kind of capacity and duration would be able to address them, and the faults would be cleared by the time you would need to have the opportunity to recharge. When you're looking at storage that is very long in duration, 100 hours or hundreds of hours, these are going to be cycled maybe weekly or monthly or even less. And when you get to those kinds of operations, the resilience benefits become a little bit less because you don't have quite as many outages in terms of frequency that last that long, but you do have geographic extent benefits. So in terms of being able to access different parts of the country to take advantage of different availabilities or load patterns throughout the seasons. And so that starts to point to different requirements for both scale and geographic portability, and potentially even efficiency. And so sort of the envelope, what you might tolerate would be very different. So what do we need to do to get there? There is a DOE Energy Storage Grand Challenge cost and performance report that's in the process of being updated. So it's expanding its sort of business as usual cost projections from about 4 storage technologies today to about a dozen once the 2022 version is released. And it sets up some business as usual expectations for what a storage system might cost in 2030. And a lot of them show some performance improvements, but there will still be a gap between where we think storage technologies might go, independent of R&D interventions, and where they really need to get to in terms of levelized cost of storage in order for decarbonization to occur in a way that minimizes rate impacts to end users. Despite the gap, I think there are many technologies for which the underlying materials costs are so low that RD&D is a credible cost reduction strategy. So with that, it gives me a chance to mention the long duration storage shot. So the long duration storage shot is one of the DOE's Earth shots that has been set up by this administration, and it is managed by the Energy Storage Grand Challenge. And the target is sort of intuitively easy to explain. Excuse me for that. We are basically trying to target the storage levelized cost that would allow you to move energy from time A to time B by adding less than 5 cents a kilowatt hour. If we get to that point, then dependable clean energy becomes competitive with existing energy sources. So the other shot really leverages the Energy Storage Grand Challenge use case framework, which was first unveiled a little more than a year ago, where we began to put into place this use case-based R&D coordination strategy. So instead of saying we need to advance a certain technology along a particular set of dimensions or metrics, we instead set up a group of half a dozen use cases, each with their own technology cost and performance requirements, and then worked backwards from there to identify, to allow for any of the technologies that have a shot at beating them to be part of the Storage Grand Challenge. So what the long duration storage Earth shot does is elevates 2 of them. One is facilitating grid decarbonization. So that is the decarbonizing a grid use case, as well as serving remote communities. So communities that are weakly connected or not connected at all to the bulk power system, and making sure that they also have access to reliable, clean energy. So some thoughts about DOE's storage collaboration and how we got there. It's a little bit of bureaucratic history, but I think it illustrates how an institution sort of organically recognizes an issue and begins to sort of self-organize into a way that is clearer and more productive. So prior to 2018, there had been informal storage working groups within the department. So ARPA-E, energy efficiency, OE, and the Office of Science were major participants. And then there was also this initiative called Beyond Batteries from EERE, meant to coordinate sort of the storage related activities within EE. In early 2019, OE and the Office of Electricity, my office, and EERE proposed the Advanced Energy Storage Initiative, which was probably the first sort of formally proposed coordination structure, in that it appeared in our budget request. Sort of very closely following that, we're actually told by Congress through the Research and Technology Investment Act to put together cross-cutting groups for major technology issues. And the first one, of course, that was chosen was storage. And that became the Energy Storage Grand Challenge in 2020. And that now encompasses all of the offices that have anything to do with storage, from basic energy sciences in SC to the more deployment-focused activities in offices like the Office of Tech Transition and the Loan Programs Office. And in 2021, so last July, the Energy Storage Grand Challenge was used to launch the long duration storage shot. So a little bit more of detail on what the ESGC is. So instead of continuing to sort of propagate the existing stovepipes within DOE, we identified 5 main tracks for which there would be cross-cutting interest and that were critical to the advancement of the storage industry. So the first is, the first track is technology development, and that's the track that I also chair. And here we want to maximize the pace of storage innovation through ambitious goals and rigorous metrics, and focused on the use cases that I had presented earlier. The second is manufacturing and supply chain, looking to lower manufacturing costs, accelerate the scale up of manufacturing innovations, and enable the reliable sourcing of critical materials. The next 3 move from technology-focused tracks to much more cross-cutting issues. So for example, technology transition includes enhancing access to experts, facilities, and intellectual property, industry and market analysis, like the cost reduction graphs that you saw earlier, and then collaboration and engagement with the industry. Policy and valuation, while probably a smaller resource activity, is especially critical for storage. Giving technical assistance to support effective storage policies or storage relevant policies has been one of the major enablers to storage deployment recently, as well as providing assistance in planning and regulatory processes. And then finally, we recognize that developing the broad workforce for RD and D manufacturing operation is going to be necessary to scale this industry to the levels that I showed on the first graph, which is showing orders of magnitudes of growth. And all of these tracks have their own laboratory working groups, and we have regular contributors from over 100 lab staff from nearly every lab doing work in energy storage. And I very much appreciate that the expertise being contributed there. So a little bit of a tour through why this kind of coordination is necessary. So if you look at the continuum of activities from foundational efforts and materials out to demo and valuation, and then to commercialization, institutional support, market development, we cover the gamut, but the need to be well coordinated is probably very important. So you have efforts from basic energy sciences that are probably broadly applicable to many technologies, and you kind of split off into the technology specific offices like nuclear, fossil, office of electricity, or ERE, trying to get individual technologies to sort of the first of a kind or applied demo stage. And then things sort of join back together as you get to commercialization, institutional support, you get more cross-cutting activities, and finally market development, trying to pave the way to make sure that these new technologies really do have commercial demand and can be not just scaled from a technical perspective, but scaled from the perspective of the market actually pulling them into adoption. So an example of where these kinds of collaborations through the ESG structure have been really fruitful is the AOMO and OE flow battery FOA that was awarded late last fall. And this is an example of an opportunity that really leverages the strengths of the different offices. So there's the Advanced Manufacturing Office within ERE that's focused on innovative manufacturing capabilities, technologies, and practices, looking to scale up new manufacturing techniques and looking to streamline and secure our supply chains. And on the other hand, there's OE that has focused for a very long time specifically on stationary grid energy storage and has built up a sizable capability in terms of validating validating new technologies for this specific application or set of applications. So what this funding does is leverages, it ultimately selected 4 companies to work on sort of this middle area of materials to product assembly. And what it leverages is the sort of the prototypes that would come from these project performers would then be validated at scale at the DOE national labs that OE has supported to ensure that they would perform for the entire intended application. So it again leverages sort of AOMO's strengths in manufacturing and then OE's collaborative strengths in testing and validation in a way that I think is efficient and will be very effective for this industry. I'll talk a little bit more about another cross-cutting activity, storage technical assistance and regulatory support. This will also be a joint office activity looking at regulatory market and policy decisions to drive deployment. The barrier here is often informational, so providing advanced data, tools, and analysis will help stakeholders identify, what storage, if any, would be optimal and beneficial for them, and then help them identify how storage would be beneficial to the broader energy system. So roughly 3 stages of developing resources, then engaging in analytical and technical assistance, and then finding ways to help specific groups of stakeholders increase their capabilities and also learn from each other through the dissemination of best practices. And then I want to give a note to establishing connections throughout the labs. And we heard earlier about NREL's new Aries facility, and I think it's an important part of the overall portfolio of lab capabilities that have been built up over the past decades that will really accelerate energy storage developers. So if you go from solution creators, academia, early stage innovators, material suppliers, there are a whole host of capabilities from MRF at Argonne to GridSea at Oak Ridge to the new Grid Storage Launchpad at PNNL that are designed to solve the known and unknown problems in terms of getting a concept from a paper or benchtop scale to the next stage. And I think Aries and other labs sort of at this integration stage is perfectly positioned to make sure a lot of more of these concepts can perform as designed and will work well when integrated into larger systems, so that they will be ready for the deployment enablers at the end, like automakers or utilities, investors, and others. I also do want to mention that the Energy Storage Grand Challenge is working to further the ability of the labs to better connect with industry. So if we have a concept or prototype, can you be matched with the most appropriate DOE and lab capability to accelerate that to deployment? So back in September of last year, we launched the Energy Storage Grand Challenge specific portal on the Office Technology Transitions Lab Partnering Service. So the preliminary database is up there, but we hope to augment and increase them this year. There are literally hundreds of listings of individual experts and facilities and other capabilities, and it is designed to make it as seamless as possible for someone who has an idea, but maybe also a barrier in this industry, to find someone who can help them work through it and get them to market as quickly as possible. I'm going to stop. I'm going to end with just a note on the formal storage collaboration points sort of throughout DOE. So if you think of our DOE sort of pseudo virtual venture capitalist cycle as going from outreach to the strategy development out to funding and program project reviews, there are many opportunities for collaboration. There's for example, program strategy development that's often derived from DOE level goals so that we're all on the same page. There are DOE-wide cross-cut coordination. So energy storage grand challenge is one of them, but there are also other ones related to the grid as well as AI. Of course, all of you are aware of the collaborations that go on, especially through project reviews, and that offices help each other. And then I will also note that Congress requires the DOE Electricity Advisory Committee to perform a review of the Department of Storage activities every 2 years. So that's another opportunity for external or formal feedback on the way we're doing things. And I'll close with an illustration of the cast of hundreds that supports this effort. So currently we've set up a laboratory coordination effort for the Energy Storage Grand Challenge that's led by 4 labs, but includes participation, again, as I mentioned, from all the ones leading energy storage innovation efforts. And without them, none of this could work as effectively as it does. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I'll turn it back to our moderator.
Thank you, Eric. It was great providing this perspective from DOE and all the activities going on. It's it's a lot going on. I think it would be good to kind of continue doing that. Collaboration is important, as you mentioned, kind of, especially the challenge that ahead of us, kind of decarbonization of the grid. Our next speaker is Jen Kurtz. She's my center director and my boss. So it's very pleasure to introduce her. She led this effort of this conversation for energy storage seminar series, and this first one, and we're going to continue future ones, and we'll let you know. Jen leads the Energy Conversion and Storage Center, which look at many different aspects of interdisciplinary technologies, and she's going to talk about that. I think more than that, she also involved with ARES, Advanced Research and Integration Energy Systems. She's actually leading that, and that's she has 2 hats and 2 big hats to fill, a big job. And before that, Jen was involved in the hydrogen and fuel cell system. So, Jen, please go ahead. Pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thanks so much. Let me just share my screen here. And you could just let me know that you've got the presentation, the slides.
Yep,
okay.
I see that. Thank you.
All right, very good. Well, thanks for joining us today. We're so excited to have you here. Eric, it was a really great kind of setup of what the DOE vision is around energy storage, the Grand Challenge, the wide range of aspects of that Grand Challenge that you're tackling. So thanks so much for giving us that perspective. What I'd like to do is just share with you how NREL's Energy Conversion and Storage Systems Research Center is tackling some of these challenges around energy storage solutions. One of the things that one of our touchstones is this phrase, clean and affordable energy when and where it is needed. That's something in terms of a vision that we connect with and look to see how we as a research center can support that vision. We recognize we're just one small piece into all of the opportunities here and challenges. And then throughout the presentation, I've got some images here. So I just want to let you know this particular image is actually looking at these streamlines representing lithium ions and the electrolyte phase as ions travel through pores between the solid active material particles. That's just setting the stage a little bit for some of the research that we're doing that connects, Eric, as you were talking about, with that wide range of activities all the way from the basic material science to the commercialization and application of this. So we're thinking about this clean and affordable energy when and where it's needed. And coming to the challenge, Eric really laid this out so well. But we need energy storage solutions, and we need them quickly. We have ambitious decarbonization goals. We have ambitious goals that are looking at just energy systems, no matter where you are, who you are, and what your background is. Those are pushing us in a with a sense of urgency, right? And so our priority within our research center and connecting across multiple labs and partners is, how do we advance, how do we support this challenge through research activities? And so we're thinking to set the stage for this conversation today and tomorrow is that isolated technology advancements aren't going to be fast enough, right? They're not going to help us drive towards these big ambitious goals soon enough. 2035, Eric mentioned, for decarbonized grid. That means that we need to have solution sets that are ready to be deployed into the marketplace much sooner than 2035 if we're going to hit that goal. And so we're coming from the perspective that sure, there's technology advancements, and if we just let it take its course, it would certainly solve challenges, just not at the rate that we need them to be addressed at, right? And so we're working on R&D for technology advancements that span electrochemical, molecular, thermal, and mechanical energy storage systems and conversion opportunities. So within the water research space, we're looking at hydro, marine energy, and water systems. And then there's thermal research looking at concentrated solar power and solar thermal fuels and storage, geothermal process heat. Then there's batteries and studying materials to manufacturing and the durability and reliability of batteries like solid state ion batteries. And then we also have hydrogen production and integration and fuels, fuel cell safety and storage. And what we're looking at here, this is just one of those things that helps remind us of some of our goals, right? Our vision. And this is Hot Springs Blue Pool in Aspen, Colorado. So really connecting in with the geothermal place. So as I stated, isolated technology advancement, we don't think is going to be fast enough. This slide is an illustrative example of our approach, of our strategy to tackle the kind of NREL's contribution into supporting advancements in energy storage and conversion. And that's thinking about it from the integration perspective, thinking about it from a holistic systems view, understanding the different technologies, different sectors, and also readiness levels of where we are with technology. So we're looking at this cohesive approach to help us develop solution sets that can work with both legacy and new technologies, and also help us build and accelerate any advancements that are happening in kind of the national lab space into the marketplace. And with this, here's an example where we may be looking at electrochemical storage and also factoring in the duration of energy storage needs, whether we're looking at stationary applications, mobile applications. How do we factor in controllable loads and other energy storage solutions that help us, especially when we get a future energy system with really high levels of renewables? And so we think that from the systems view, there are a lot of opportunities. And I want to break down a little bit of, provide you a couple of examples of the research space that we're working in right now and how we're tackling these problems. So first off, as we're thinking about integration, we recognize that the requirements are going to drive our R&D priorities. We're connected, of course, closely with the DOE activities and the priorities. So I think you'll see some consistency with setting up from what Eric had showed us with the Energy Storage Grand Challenge. And these requirements hit on the temporal and spatial needs, right? Do we need the short-term or the long-term energy storage? Where does that need to be geographically located? And then, of course, low cost and available to all. And then without sacrificing any of the safety or reliability for these systems. And then as I think about this, that a major part of our vision that's helping to set our research strategy and priorities is how this can get applied into the marketplace. And so we have to be thinking about the demonstration and deployment aspects of energy storage technologies. So in the context of thinking about the different pieces of requirements, what are some of the holistic system needs that drive some of the research opportunities that we're looking at for energy storage and conversion? Scalable and flexible. This is a necessity. I think, Eric, one of your first slides really hit on the challenge, right, of how big and how long we need to store and shift energy between generation and demand. We need to be thinking about the individual homes, apartment buildings, small communities, all the way up to bulk generation. And so some examples of what research activities that we have going on right now, connecting in with thermal and electrochemical energy storage, is a behind the meter storage research project, integrating commercial buildings, energy storage, electric vehicles to understand, evaluate, and optimize how different loads can provide flexible energy flow to the grid, and also balance with other things like renewable generation on site. And then like the image that we see here, this is an old sawmill in Maine, and it's been retrofitted with a hydro turbine, fish-friendly opportunity by Natel Energy. And so this hits on the partnerships and the hydropower research that we have, thinking about and studying the dispatchable aspects of the operation for hydropower, and how we can quickly pull the stored energy back to where we need it. One of the next things that we think about, or set of requirements that we think about, is safety and resiliency. So what we have active research in right here with the safe and resilient set of requirements is looking at things like understanding the science of safety for advanced energy storage technologies. Batteries and hydrogen come to mind right away with research activities that we have there. And for instance, studying the mechanisms and monitoring systems in a wide range of performance characteristics, and then, or performance conditions, excuse me. We're also looking at how integrated energy storage could actually provide a multi-layered line of defense to support grid resiliency. Again, energy storage, we're coming at it from the perspective that it can complement whole system performance benefits and ride out through disruptions, through catastrophic events, whether it be an extreme weather event like we saw in Texas, or wildfires. That safe and resilient is such a key aspect of the research activities that we have going on. And so we also are looking at how the different energy storage systems can be operated in such a way to help with the enhanced resiliency of our grid, especially our future decarbonized grid. And then durable and reliable. These two requirements really have work hand in hand, and we are working on research to understand the material and the component performance in particular stressors, understanding those factors that lead to degradation. And that's through different research projects where we're looking at predictive durability models, and then also understanding how different operating conditions can either drive issues with durability or opportunities in the hybridization. And so, you know, we're looking on the thermal side, for example, looking at dynamic thermal cycling and the response of the cycling unit and the where we have some failures based on the dynamic cycling. And then we're also looking at, you know, characterization of things like lithium-ion batteries and understanding where those degradation mechanisms are and how to avoid those particular challenges. Affordable and accessible are two things that we have to have. And this is something that we are talking about on a pretty regular basis, right? If we come up with a great technological solution in the lab and it still doesn't have the ability to fit into a system to be used by all and have that accessibility for all people to participate and benefit from it, we still haven't really pushed far enough into the solution set that we need for energy storage and conversion technologies. So part of our research strategy and supporting DOE and partners is looking at what are those metrics. So certainly there's cost research metrics. How do we drive down cost in kind of from the national lab perspective? And sometimes it's material, sometimes it's related to understanding higher opportunity, economic opportunities for different technologies. I'm thinking about some research that we're doing right now in geothermal, where we're reducing, looking to reduce field development costs through increasing drilling efficiency and drilling rates, for instance. Also connecting in with hydrogen research and a long duration storage financial analyst tool that helps us understand that full range of techno-economic opportunities. And with the research like this, it's driving us towards high opportunity system configurations and operating conditions that help us really connect and consider this affordable and accessible. There's certainly a scale up that matters here with affordability too. And how do we drive down costs, not only through some of the basic science work in materials and in individual technologies, but how can we pull them together? How can we operate them together in such a way that we get a benefit from the integration, the hybridization of these systems? And what we're looking at with this particular image is actually marine energy. And I think, you know, it's something like a very high percentage of people in the US live very close to coastal areas. And so it helps with that accessibility and paying attention to the geographical resource opportunities that we have. I want to hit on sustainability. And Eric, I saw that you'd had manufacturing and supply chain in a few of your slides and connecting in with Energy Storage Grand Challenge and the long duration energy storage Earthshot. It's something that's you know, really important to help set the stage and priorities for our research activities. What we see in this image is looking at resale, and this is where we're looking at second life or recyclability and understanding the supply chain modeling for lithium-ion batteries in particular. So I didn't mention at the start, but NREL has 3 critical objectives that we are fitting into as a research center. And it includes advancements, technology, and increased scientific understanding of integrated energy pathways, electrons to molecules, and the circular economy, understanding the recyclability, understanding the impact of the new energy technologies that we are looking at has to be part of a successful set of energy systems that are going to support the decarbonized grid, for instance. I mentioned that we can't hit on the, you know, trying to accelerate technologies into the marketplace without thinking about demonstration and deployment. As a national lab and at NREL, excuse me, One of the ways that we're doing that is through ARES, the Advanced Research on Integrated Energy Systems, where we're looking to have a safe environment that is coming from the perspective of a whole system and looking to prove things out. We want to avoid adding risk into our communities, into our marketplace, into providers and end users when we know that there will be some vulnerabilities. Let's use a research platform partnering with national labs and other industry so that we can push and de-risk, optimize, and help drive towards secure controls of future energy systems that will help us accelerate, or excuse me, help us get these to the marketplace sooner than what we would do if we weren't thinking about how energy storage, how energy conversion technologies fit into a whole system, and without the ability to demonstrate and prove out some of the operations. We're really pushing towards understanding some challenges here with this platform around physical size of energy technologies, especially the variability in the wide range of energy systems that we're going to look at, from small scale distributed to the bulk. We're also looking at the secure control of large numbers, millions to tens of millions of devices, of interconnected devices, and how rapidly that's changing. And then certainly integrating multiple diverse technologies, how we can pull in multiple energy storage technologies to help support overarching goals. I wanted to wrap up with the market readiness and impact that is driving us. And we think that the partnership and commercialization, Maggie, you had touched on this too, is so important to do that. And that's part of why I'm most excited for the seminar talks after me today and tomorrow, to see what people are thinking about. How can we really come together and accelerate and push forward so that we can hit these big ambitious decarbonization goals, and make sure that that system and the technologies and what we're looking at really can be able to handle the diverse needs, whether it be from a community and also a just perspective for these technologies. So we're thinking about things like, how do we partner? Who are the right partners? How can we help support? Because we're just a piece of this whole picture. And we're really looking forward to pushing and understanding how to do our role in that grand scheme a little bit better. And so I had the great advantage of representing a large number of research folks in just a quick hit on our research capabilities today. And so I'm thankful and grateful to our staff at NREL and our partnerships across national labs, DOE, and with partners. And with that, I'll wrap up and just say thank you for being here. And I'm excited to see where this conversation goes.
Thank you, Jen, for providing that overview and hitting all the high marks of what's needed for the decarbonization with energy storage, and also the capabilities that NREL has. Just we are almost halfway. I just want to, before going to next speaker, as kind of to audience and also other speakers to start thinking about questions for each speaker, and also in general subject of integration of energy storage technologies and all the challenges ahead of us for decarbonization of the grid and transportation. So if you just put your questions on the way, and we can collect them, and then we can, at the end of the speakers discussion, we're going to have a panel discussion about from at 11 o'clock Mountain Time, and we go from there. So thank you, Jen. So now I think next speaker is Erin Miner, and she is the Senior Project Manager of Electric Power Research Institute, and she's going to probably provide a perspective of utilities on energy storage. It's just kind of an important area that's coming up. And so Erin is a registered professional engineer in the state of California and has BS and MS in electrical engineering from Cal Poly. Erin, if you'd like to start uploading your presentation, and
we'll be happy to hear from you. That would be great.
Thanks. Yeah, let me upload the presentation. Is that showing in presentation mode now?
Not yet.
Not yet.
And you're on second slide.
Okay. Tested this morning. Apologies for that. Let me try one more time. Is that showing now?
Not yet.
It's just in the application view instead of the presentation view.
All right, how does that look?
Great.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for inviting me to speak. I'm with the Electric Power Research Institute, EPRI, and today want to focus the discussion on the Energy Storage Integration Council, which is one portion of EPRI's program. And what we're trying to do with the Energy Storage Integration Council is to facilitate an open discussion between all the different stakeholders. You know, EPRI has a strong utility perspective given our membership and our annual research portfolio, but the utility members thought it was really important to bring together all the different stakeholders to talk about the issues. And so this discussion will be a little bit different. It'll be focused on more near-term challenges and how we can collaboratively work together to address those. And so we do that collaboration through coming together and creating publicly available tools and guides. And so ESIC has been around since 2013, and it's able to evolve and adapt with the changing needs of the industry. So here is a snapshot of some of the stakeholders. I mentioned you know, utilities, which EPRI has that strong perspective, but really important to engage all the different stakeholders so that we can align. A lot of, you know, what you'll hear about ESIC is that we want to align on common approaches, terminology, in order to reduce soft costs and help to advance storage deployment. So really bringing together all the different parties, and it's actually evolved over time as the needs and challenges have changed. We've brought in new stakeholders, new subject matter experts, which I'll share through some examples of the work we've done. And so our collaborative process, really coming together, identifying the gaps, and again, more focused on near term. So what are the challenges? We meet in strategy meetings twice a year and just say, you know, what's top of mind? What are people trying to work through? And a lot of times what we hear is that different stakeholders are going through the same challenge, but they're coming at it in different ways. And so we can align on, we can come together and look at tools or guides that we can create to help to close those gaps and make sure we can move forward on those. And so, you know, what are the gaps? What can we do to help address them together? And then creating those through task force, where we get the subject matter experts together. We discuss, you know, what the issues are, what the industry best practices are, and then we take those and put them through a review process with a broader group after the subject matter experts have put together some work. And then EPRI will manage that editorial process of, and this is a process that's ongoing. And so all of our resources are living documents, and the goal is to put something out there to have the industry use it as much as possible, provide that feedback back in, and then update it. And it's an ongoing conversation and a documentation of how the industry is evolving and improving on the way we execute projects. We have three main focus areas or working groups. The first one is focused on grid services and analysis. How do we quantify energy storage value, cost, and impacts? Can we create tools? So EPRI has an open source tool called Dervet, and facilitating the discussion. So understanding what are the needs for modeling of energy storage, how can we incorporate that in a way that can be used as a communication tool to talk about storage valuation. The second group is focused on testing and characterization, so understanding how to measure energy storage, express its performance, test it in a consistent way, especially when you have a broad range of technologies, and even within manufacturers and how systems are integrated and arranged. Can you test it in a consistent manner so that when you're looking at different test results, you have a good understanding of how to compare them against each other? The third area is focused on grid integration, safely and reliably deploying storage, and this encompasses a lot of topics in addition to safety and reliability, cybersecurity, controls, commissioning. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into, you know, once it's in the field, how do we get it up and running and operating safely? And so going into an example to show how ESIC can adapt and focus on the current needs of the time. This example is a little bit dated, but really still drives home the message of why we need to continuously have these discussions as a group, and be adaptable and look at focusing and changing our as the industry evolves, making sure that we can keep up with it. So this is some surveying we've done in our strategy meetings, and all of these are related to safety, and it looks at, you know, what is the industry doing? What should ESIC be doing? Is this a gap? If it's a gap, is it being addressed by others, or is it something that ESIC should focus on? So you can see, like, these are all related to safety. In 2018, there was a lot of codes and standards developed. So I think the consensus was, like, we've got a good handle, we're catching up. We just need to track the codes and standards and make sure they're implemented, and that will help to ensure the safety of the system. And then as you saw a shift in perspective, so in April 2019, there was the incident surprised Arizona, and several fires had been reported in Korea, or battery related. And so it immediately became a priority. And so ESIC, being focused on more near-term collaboration, was able to shift and create some tools to support that safety discussion. And then, you know, 2020 still a big focus on safety, but, you know, some different stakeholders had different thoughts on whether or not it should be prioritized. And it's good to get a sense of, you know, if these things are being covered by other efforts, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. What we want to do is leverage them, point them to the correct industry, to the correct resources that they can leverage. So continuing to evolve over time. And safety remains a priority. So now we're in 2022. In the first month, there have been 2 stationary energy storage incidents. There's a couple more if you count one that was a system in transport, and then one at a recycling facility. And so it's still an issue, and we need to look at that and still come together. And the safety topic is one where we able to bring in new stakeholders, and so bringing in first responders, that fire perspective, fire department perspective, and gain those and open up the discussion. And so there's still challenges around, you know, codes and standards adoption, information about safety, benchmarking, but really what we're trying to do is facilitate that conversation, identify the high priority needs, and then work towards addressing them. So what we did and so this graphic kind of illustrates the need for bringing in all the different stakeholders, and why safety, as an example, is important, you know, across its full life cycle, but also, you know, thinking about from the design of the technology up to the integrated system level. And you know, thinking about battery energy storage in particular, we can say you might hear people say, well, this technology is safer than this because of X, Y, and Z, but that's maybe the underlying technology. And so when you go up to the integrated system level, you need to add layers of protection across that. For example, with LFP, some say is a safer technology than NMC for lithium-ion battery technology. But we've seen many fires and explosions of LFP, and it has to do with the fact that it needs to be integrated at the system level, and you need all these protections in place. And you know, also across the whole life cycle. So just these examples this year with you know, a system in transportation, and then some operational, and then some at a recycling facility, needing to look at the full spectrum. And therefore, again, you know, being aware of all of the different needs and the different stakeholder perspectives across the life and different scales of energy storage. So an example of how we can come together and really, you know, emphasizing that we're trying to have a discussion, or trying to create tools that improve the discussion and make it clear and transparent about what we're trying to do. And so one thing we did was put together a reference hazard mitigation analysis to facilitate the discussion. And instead of just saying my technology is safer because of X, Y, or Z, really talking about it within the context of what different threats there are that could result in a particular hazard, and what the consequence of that hazard is, and the strategies that would prevent and mitigate those incidents from happening. So really laying it out and saying how different safety features would address different issues, and providing a holistic solution. And you know, this is also an example of that iterative process where we looked at, we published something in 2019. EPRI worked with their members and did site evaluations, and then incorporated those lessons learned back into a 2021 publication. And so, you know, EPRI has a battery safety roadmap, and there's that's just one topic. So we need to continue the discussion and look at other ways that we can collaborate. So this is just a snapshot, and I'll leave it here as a leave behind so that you can see the different efforts that we're working on within EPRI. And then another example would be, you know, performance and reliability. And this is really important for utilities to be able to invest in storage. And you know, the track record for commercial assets is short, and we need to be able to verify this and independently verify this. And especially, you know, we're focused on near-term issues, but with all these emerging technologies, and really being able to characterize these systems and get the data on them in order to be able to make assessments, so that when we're ready to make the investments in those technologies and features, that there's a confidence in how the systems will perform, how they can be operated to reliably support the grids, and understanding all the different aspects of that in order to minimize risk to the project. And again, looking at, you know, this is a specific example on data, but really it requires thinking at all different levels and getting all the different stakeholders integrated into the discussion. So you may have, you know, manufacturers where you want to get certain data, or manufacturers where you need to understand certain characteristics of the technology, integrators where you need to make sure you have all the different data streams so that you can test them, and you have the operators who need to understand how to operate the system, interpret the data in order to make informed decisions on the way they manage the system. And so there's a lot of different stakeholders coming together, and you layer on different policies on you know, reporting and aggregation, things of that sort. And so it's a dynamic field, but really trying to clarify that and communicate that between all the different parties. again, just some examples of tools to help that support performance and reliability analysis, including data guidelines, test manuals, and O&M tracking. So those were just a few highlights of examples that really drive home the need for collaboration, and what we need for coming in from the utility perspective is it's really important that we align with all the different the parties so that the systems are safe and reliable and affordable and environmentally responsible. So here's another leave behind of all the other different resources that we've put together, and contact information. We really encourage you I jumped at this opportunity to talk about the Energy Storage Integration Council because we also want to bring in new stakeholders, new perspectives, and know what the issues of the industry are. And so hopefully we'll get some additional participation there. And that's what I have for today.
Thank you, Erin. I appreciate that presentation and providing perspective from utilities. We have one question for you, I think, that came up regarding the fires with the lithium-ion batteries, and the questions that has it caused utilities and your organizations and others to move away from lithium-ion batteries and to some other kind of potentially safer technologies like flow batteries or thermal storage, whatever. Of course, cost is a big issue, but if you can speak to that, that would be great.
Yeah, I think there is a need for a better understanding of the utility of lithium-ion technology. And so we have a large collaborative project with many utilities, and we bring in the experts to really understand that. So understanding and the risk associated with that. But at the same time, it is true that looking at other technology alternatives is important, especially when you think about there might be different settings or locations. If you're in a rural area versus in a highly dense populated area, you might think about your approach to technology different. So we also have an emerging technology project that looks at all those different alternatives, but at the same time, that project will also look at the different safety aspects of those. So, there may be less fire risk with those, but other things that need to be evaluated. So I think that utilities are looking at risk from the different perspectives of safety.
Thank you very much, Erin. I appreciate that. So if Rebecca, we can go to our next speaker. Our next speaker, Esther Cheat-Sin-Day. She's a project manager with Dallas Fort Worth International Airport. So kind of brings the perspective of a end user, basically. She leads the Dallas Fort Worth Digital Twin and Morpheus Building Energy Optimization Partnership with Enroll and DOE. And she has a BS and MS in Environmental Science from Texas Christian University. Esther, if we can go ahead, put slides up, that would be great.
Good morning, everyone. So I don't have slides today, but I'm just going to have more of a conversation with you, walk you through our journey at DFW International Airport and what we see as the opportunities around behind the meter storage and what we need to make that successful, and how behind the meter storage aligns with DFW's vision and needs for the near future. So I'll start with the background of Dallas Fort Worth International Airport. As Ahmad said, my name's Esther Cheat-Sin-Day, and I've been at DFW for about 7 years. Dallas Fort Worth Airport is larger than the island of Manhattan, and it's geographically situated between Dallas and Fort Worth, who are also our owner cities. It opened in 1974 with only 4 terminals and 3 runways. Since then, we've added to 5 terminals, 3 stingers, and 7 runways and 6 cargo complexes. The reason I'm bringing that background is to help you understand that it's a complex system with a lot of moving parts and different movement of energy throughout the system. And in addition to the runways, the terminals, the cargo complexes, we have about 1,300 lane miles of roadways, 133 landside bridges, and over 75 million square feet of pavement. With all that complexity, we've also been able to achieve carbon neutrality, which is very exciting. In August of 2020, we also committed to an ambitious goal of attaining net zero carbon by 2030. And so with that ambitious goal, I'll come back to it later. Essentially, we absolutely need behind the meter storage, and we are leveraging some partnerships and collaborative relationships with NREL and other partners in order for us to meet that goal. So just like other ports, DFW Airport is a complex system with multifaceted interactions between subcomponents, networks, and transboundaries, flows of energy and systems like water, sewer, and roadways. And all these systems work together to maintain the safe movement of people, goods, and services. The airport complexity presents us with opportunities to solve complex problems, because now you have a complex ecosystem that can serve as a fabric for you to exercise and explore different opportunities. And with these complex problems, we know that we have to leverage sustainability, and sustainability is one of the key pillars of DFW Airport. And the way we envision and implement sustainability is we look at it from 4 different pillars: economic viability, operational excellence, natural resource conservation and protection, and then the people, the social aspect, social responsibility. And in addition to looking at sustainability within those 4 pillars, we've also noticed and learned that sustainability is an intentional effort for us. It is an absolute business imperative, and our journey has, even though the airport has operated for about 48 years, our sustainability journey started about 20 years. And as the largest carbon neutral airport, it's important for me to set the stage as to how we got here. So I'll start by defining what sustainability means to us as an organization. It means meeting the present needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Sustainability is a problem-solving process that uses value-derived and experience-based decision-making criteria to achieve some desired social ecological system state within the boundary of the airport, of course, within some defined period. And so within the airport boundary, what I'm going to focus on is our net zero goals. And I would like to also make sure the audience knows that for us, sustainability has been integrated into the fabric of business. So if you hear our CEO speaking about sustainability and why it's imperative to how the airport succeeds, it's just everyone now understands that we cannot move forward without sustainability. So at the core of our sustainability business, we're reminded of the need to holistically approach problem solving and consider those 4 pillars. And in most instances, most of the people on this seminar would probably be familiar with the fact that we always consider economics, we always consider operations. We've started to consider impacts of our actions on natural resources, but for some reason, we usually will leave out the people, the employees, the community, the passengers. And so that's something that had been, we won't say it was out of sight, but it wasn't a key priority, and it has transitioned into one of the main pillars of how we even operate and how we do business on a daily basis. So even in that instance of being challenged by certain issues, we also know that climate change is is challenging us. Extreme weather events and the frequency of those weather events is challenging the airport and challenging all of us on this call. And so with those challenges and global warming, climate change, extreme weather events, population growth, we also know that it's difficult for people to comprehend how to even start solving those problems. But we, as DFW Airport, we are very proud of our accomplishments and how we've been able to look at some of those problems, take on the low-hanging fruits, and I'll be addressing and sharing about the low-hanging fruits and the challenges that are before us as we transition into our journey to net zero. We have also mapped our objectives and our sustainability vision to the UN Sustainable Development Goals and have come up with 6 focus areas, which are not within DFW known as the Sustainability North Stars. These are climate action, energy performance, water and biodiversity, circular economy, equity, the people, and then health, safety, and wellness. So the reason I'm also bringing this up is we've come to understand that these 6 North Stars are how DFW can achieve a resilient status, how we can attain resiliency for our mission critical facilities and support operations for our region and for the national airspace system. At the airport, some of our accomplishments that have gotten us this far are we've been able to consolidate the rental car operations, and this resulted in reducing vehicle miles traveled by 60%. We've converted from diesel to CNG. We've also started purchasing 100% renewable electricity. We started purchasing renewable natural gas for our fleet vehicles. And so these are all the low-hanging fruits. But now we've come to understand that the future, which is that net zero carbon by 2030, is a challenging road. And as the industry and, well, as even the aviation industry starts looking into electrified aircraft, we know that that is going to add pressure to the airport system itself, as well as to the electricity delivery companies and the power grid as a whole. So we know that there's a need to increase our resiliency as an airport, and then also allow that flexibility to flow into the rest of the system. So we started off with mapping our emissions since around 2009 to understand which systems within DFW Airport would have the highest impact. And we came to understand that our heating capacity is responsible for about 70% of our energy consumption at the airport, as well as it's the largest remaining source of carbon emissions at the airport. So the heating capacity at the airport is largely fueled by natural gas, and that's why it's something that presents an opportunity. We have tried to pursue efficiency as much as possible. As I said, some of our accomplishments were consolidating operations, reducing vehicle miles traveled, pursuing CNG and RNG, and even purchasing 100% renewables. And in addition to that, we've also modernized some buildings where possible. We renovated 3 of our largest terminals, which covers about maybe 16 million square feet. But even with those renovations and those efficiency improvements, we've realized that we need to go beyond efficiency. We need to build resilience, and we cannot build resilience without leveraging key strategies such as behind the meter storage, on-site energy generation, and it has to be on-site renewable energy generation, microgrids, and then even integrating sub-metering within our buildings, and then continuing to leverage building retrofits. So with behind the meter storage, our thought process is we know it's a path that could enable a much higher amount or adoption of renewable energy into the Texas grid. As of now, the Texas grid is about 8% renewable energy, which for Texas, that is huge, but there's so many opportunities to increase that amount of renewable energy within our energy portfolio. At DFW, we have implemented thermal energy storage, and we use this particularly for cooling. So with regards to our cooling demand, there's things that we have started doing that have yielded some benefits. And with the thermal energy storage cooling system, we are able to mitigate demand response charges for both transmission and energy distribution. And this is a significant relief to our electricity delivery companies like Oncor, as well as to the grid as a whole. Texas summers have resulted in multiple emergency action alerts that we get as a result of the grid being, I guess, vulnerable or not being as reliable just due to demand. Texas has been one of the fastest growing states, and DFW in particular is one of the fastest growing regions in the country, and it has been for the past few years. And with that change in growth, we know that there's more pressure on the overall grid. And considering that, we also know that electrified mobility and adoption of electric vehicles will soon be approaching and has already started. In fact, we have to prepare for those circumstances and find ways to build resiliency for the airport and for the grid. So we are currently considering and evaluating the right portfolio of behind the meter storage in addition to our thermal energy storage that is currently used for cooling. We're trying to explore how to develop similar systems for our heating demand. We have explored implementing and constructing an electric central utility plant that would support the heating demand for the airport. And we're currently trying to find ways to fund that project because it is coming at a premium. And that is something that we have noticed that as we start trying to implement these more challenging solutions, they come at a cost premium, and we need to find ways to fund them and make the solutions more reliable, implement and use batteries that are even more reliable, have more capacity. That way we can do more and stretch the dollar. As a quasi-government institution, we don't end up making, we're not for profit, so we don't have a lot of dollars that we can be spending on a lot of things, but we can stretch the dollar through partnerships and collaboration. And we've been doing that with collaborative agreements with the FAA, with NASA, with NREL, and that has yielded a lot of good results, which I will touch on later on. So why behind the meter storage? Why is it imperative? And I think to the audience here probably already knows, but I would like to just take a few moments to briefly explain the threat landscape that confronts us as DFW Airport. We have several different threats that are confronting the airport ecosystem, but some of the more critical ones are related to environmental threats such as droughts, fires, air quality, extreme heat, extreme cold temperatures, and then lagging policies and lagging decision-making. And those things, when they're combined, are so impactful and end up resulting in problems within our system, but also broader problems within the Texas region as a state. So when you think of the recent winter storm that happened in 2021, a lot of people are familiar with it, but when you start analyzing the reasons, and there's several reasons, and I'm only pointing out what other people have proposed as some of the reasons as to why we got where we were. With ERCOT as our grid keeper, in the summers, they already knew that they were vulnerable and they would implement those emergency action plans. And they've already notified several different people that we have experienced more than, I think, more 100-degree+ days in the most recent past. And that has resulted in the grid being even more unstable in some instances. And so when the grid is unstable, yes, we can implement thermal energy storage, but at DFW, we implement these demand response strategies, but sometimes we don't even know what systems within the building are consuming the most energy and how can we fix those issues if possible. So, and I guess when we think of those systems and how to fix them, we start adding to, okay, we have these vulnerabilities, we have internal vulnerabilities, and then we have the disruptive technologies that are coming up. We have electrified mobility coming, and in addition to all these challenges, population is growing, demand for electricity is growing, and it all culminates in a need for us and all of us really to prioritize resilience and go beyond just risk mitigation. Resilience allows us to improve our ability to absorb disruptions. And we noticed that we've had research where we compared the winter storm in 2011, which was not as catastrophic as 2021, but was pretty bad. And we compared the data from 2011 to 2021 and noticed that despite 2021 being more dramatic and receiving more media attention, as an airport, we were able to respond to that disruption faster, and we were able to maintain mission critical facilities operational and reduce the overall disruptions to the national airspace system. So we know that resilience is a key pillar in our success. Current energy systems cannot reliably and consistently meet the increasing energy demands. The energy system of the future really must successfully leverage these variable and intermittent renewable energy sources to meet demand and power generation, as well as to allow us to decarbonize. And for us to be able to achieve our energy goals and our clean energy goals, we know that we have to not only apply forward thinking and apply energy storage technologies, we need to come to forums like these where we can have discussions and learn from each other and figure out how to implement solutions that can not just help the airport, but be translated and shared across the systems. So I guess in my transition to starting to share about the two key projects that I really wanted to brag about, we have partnered with the National Renewable Energy Lab, and most of the team members are represented on this call on several projects to explore opportunities for achieving and implementing behind the meter storage, implementing photovoltaics, implementing battery storage, understanding the implications of electrified mobility to DFW Airport, and then developing on-site energy, renewable energy. We recently worked on a net zero energy building strategy for one of our federally funded facilities, and that actually is becoming a model for other new facilities that will be constructed at the airport. On the mobility front, we partnered with NWEL and DOE on a project known as Athena, the Advancing Transportation Hub Efficiency project using Novell Analytics, where we leverage digital twin technology to tackle complex problems. Athena is a comprehensive digital twin where we visualize interactions between people, infrastructure, mobility, and then start running multiple scenarios, changing policies, and trying to understand that if policies say, electric cars penetration by, say, 2023, this is, of course, hypothetical, is going to be 30%. Is the airport infrastructure geared to meet that demand? Given that we already know that airport passenger growth is going from 73 million in 2019 to about 90 million in 2025. So we have to think of these things within the system. We can't just think of solving the problems in different pieces, because there's a lot of unintended consequences that come from that. So with Athena, we've been able to leverage different data streams from different sources and democratize the data from within the organization, and then democratizing the data from outside stakeholders and partners. And Athena allows us to really input our priorities, such as safety, emissions reductions, energy productivity, emissions, congestion mitigation, and then identify that sweet spot where the benefits are maximized and negative impacts are minimized, so that we can truly decouple our growth from negative impacts. And this is one of our key missions. It's to decouple growth from negative impacts, because we know that in most, growth is inevitable, but there's a lot of attitudes that think growth and negative impacts should go hand in hand, and DFW's priority and vision is around decoupling those two. And as mobility continues to shift towards electricity, we know that it's going to share the same energy sources as buildings. It will be using electricity. And this unique intersection of mobility and energy allows us to optimize and find synergies across multiple value systems. And these are some of the things I mentioned as our priorities: emissions, energy productivity, reducing costs, and maintaining reliability, mitigating congestion. And according to the Energy Information Administration, we know that buildings consume about 75% of the electricity demand, or account for about 75%. And so the most sustainable and cost-effective way is probably designing high performance buildings that are able to interact with our grid and provide real-time demand flexibility. So it's essentially expanding our thermal energy storage demand response system so that we can do even more and positively influence the grid and build our resilience. And so this need to build resiliency and have buildings that are interactive and can interact with the grid on a real-time basis resulted in another project and another partnership with NREL, which is known as the Morpheus project. And Morpheus is an energy optimization project that leverages digital twin technology to enable fully autonomous and distributed controls that effectively integrate grid operations with occupant comfort, energy savings, and emissions reductions. So our goal with Morpheus is to develop a seamless communication pathway between the building devices, the subsystems in the buildings, regardless of the manufacturer, because those are things that we know are challenging, and then move those and implement, create flexibility, reduce peak demand, and flatten those curves. We want to leverage the data from different systems and enable interoperability, as well as ensure that we can even integrate with other distributed energy resources. So in closing, our need for behind the meter storage is really to support our net zero carbon goals and support our decarbonization pathway so that we can continue decoupling growth from negative impacts. And with that, I would open the floor to maybe questions or return the mic to Ahmad.
Thank you, Esther. That was great, providing a perspective of what's going on with the sustainability at the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. And looks like you guys were ahead of your time, kind of 20 years ago. And we can discuss that during the panel discussion, how it evolved. One quick question here is kind of, what is the average power consumption of the airport as a whole? Just kind of a ballpark, if you can answer that. If not, we can provide that later on when you have time. Can you turn on your speaker? Sorry.
I apologize. So I don't have the average consumption, but I know our peak demand was about 100 megawatt hours. It was
Great.
ridiculous.
Thank you. So we'll talk later about other things. So our last, thank you. Our last speaker is Dr. George Crabtree. And it's a great honor to have him here as the Director of Director for Joint Center for Energy Storage Research. And he also has seats at the mechanical engineering at the University of Illinois. He has won many awards and also has a lot of citations. So without further ado, George, if you can show a slide, that would be great.
For sure. And thanks so much, Ahmad. And what a pleasure to be here. You guys have organized just the right seminar at just the right moment. So really appreciate that. Let's see if I can get my shared screen up.
Thank you for kind words.
Oh, you're quite welcome. And yeah, let's see, I think I can go into presentation mode here. How's that? Does that look good?
Yes, looks good.
Okay.
Thank you.
And one more thing I would like to do, if I can, is get, whoops. Okay, I think I'm ready. So once again, what a pleasure to be here. I really enjoyed the introductory, or I should say the other speakers. They're not really introductory, highly relevant to the theme. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about energy storage in particular. And I think it fits perfectly here because energy storage, it's central to climate change, it's central to decarbonization, and it's going to have to change dramatically in order to achieve our goals. So my outline is over here. I want to talk a little bit about the history of energy storage. It's these three things up until now: personal electronics, electric vehicles, and the electricity grid. And a new feature, relatively new, last few years, is climate change. Its importance is growing enormously. It has three elements. We have to decarbonize to prevent the worst consequences of climate change. We're already seeing some of those consequences, but we may be able to minimize them. Those, we have to put resilience into our infrastructures and into our communities to prevent climate change from really affecting us, and we have to adapt. So certain things we can't become resilient to or prevent. How do we adapt? Supply chains and applications gaps will be a theme I'd like to present in my talk, and international competitiveness and then opportunities. So I think everybody knows the three things that lithium-ion batteries have done until now. Personal electronics still going on, a real revolution in how we deal with people and information. And it requires basically a small battery for your cell phone or your laptop, maybe 10 to 100 watt hours, needs a high energy density because you can't have it be big and heavy. And in fact, this was the original motivation for lithium-ion batteries. And very interestingly, the cost doesn't matter much because it's so small, and it's a small fraction of the cost of the electronic device. Lifetime really doesn't matter. You change your cell phone and laptop every 3 years. You don't need a battery that lasts much longer than that. And charge rate really doesn't matter because you can charge at home, and if it takes you an hour or 2 hours, that's fine, works perfectly well. Electric vehicles, a little bit different. So this started in roughly 2010, Nissan Leaf, and 2012, Tesla started to bring out its models. And it's in for a great growth spurt. In 2024, there are going to be at least 100 new battery electric vehicle models. This was reported by Consumer Reports middle of last year. It's really going to take off. You need a much bigger battery. So 50 to 100 kilowatts, that means 1,000 or let's say 10,000 times bigger than what you need for personal electronics. And you also need some of the features that were not so important for personal electronics, namely fast charge. You got to be able to do convenience charging. You can't be taking 6 or 8 hours always for your charge. You need long range. You need high safety. We heard a lot about safety earlier today, and I think that may be an underappreciated need. Long lifetime, your car lasts 16 years. Most lithium-ion batteries, EV batteries, are maybe guaranteed for 8. And it's got to be low cost, because as it is now, the cost of the lithium-ion battery is something like 30% of the cost of the car. So it's a very different performance metric requirement for EVs. Third thing, electricity grid storage. This started much later than electric vehicles. So it was 2018 really, when South Australia decided to install a big battery installation, at that time the biggest one in the world. It was 129 megawatt hours, built by Tesla. They made a big splash by saying, we'll do it in a year or it'll be free. And in fact, they made that target. A year later, everyone was watching that installation. How did it work? And in fact, it worked fine. There were no big issues, worked as expected. And now 2021, that's last year, the biggest installation is in Moss Landing in California. It's 1,600 megawatt hours. So this is another huge growth spurt coming. What kind of battery do you need? Well, something that's about 1,000 times, maybe 10,000 times bigger than what you need for an EV. You need seconds to hours firming. So clouds may shade the solar panel. The wind can fluctuate. You need something like 4-hour time shifting every day, because there's a morning and evening peak. And the evening peak may be after sunset, so that 4 hours is just about right. You need high safety, because with an even bigger battery, like we'll put in the grid, the safety dangers are huge. Need a long lifetime. Most grid infrastructure has a lifetime of maybe 20 to 40 years, and you need a low cost for sure. So these are the things we know about. And in the last year or 2 years, one more feature has been put before us, and that is climate change. So it started in 2015. The Paris Accords got a lot of attention, and it was established then that we want to keep global warming to less than 2 degrees to avoid the worst consequences of climate change. That was updated a few years later to be 1.5 degrees, an even more challenging target. And by 2050, we have to decarbonize the entire global economy. So there's new requirements here. It's not just cars, it's not just electronics, it's not just the grid. It's also long-haul trucks, rail, marine shipping, aviation. This, at least for aviation, could require batteries with 2 to 3 times the energy density of lithium-ion, a goal that lithium-ion simply can't achieve. So that means next generation batteries. We need as much as 10 days of continuous discharge at full power to back up the grid for consecutive cloudy or calm days. And this 10-day number is historical. In the past, that's what we've seen. And we need industrial heat. So industries like steel, cement, ammonia, and petrochemicals, plastics, also agriculture, land use, and ecosystems. At least for the first few, the industrial ones, we need a lot of high temperature heat, as much as 1,200, even 1,400 degrees centigrade, and great quantities of it. And that typically right now is supplied by natural gas or coal. They are chemical energy storage carriers. And we need to look for a replacement for that. So these are goals, I would say, technology that we don't have yet, commercial technology that we don't have, and we're wondering how to do it. Little bit about climate change. I'm sure everyone knows this, but just to remind you, here is the carbon dioxide emissions from 1850 up to about 2015 or so. And you see they grow dramatically. The important thing, and here we list what they are, but the important thing is they started to take off about 1950, right after World War II. That's when the world began to industrialize at a really advanced pace. If you look at the global temperature anomaly, it starts a little bit later. So here's sort of where it began to take off at a steady rate. And this is about 1980. So there's a 30-year gap between when we started to put a lot of emissions into the atmosphere and when the Earth actually started to warm significantly. If you extrapolate this, this is just a straight line extrapolation. So it's not a fancy computer model for future climate. Straight line is just business as usual, the path we're on. Well, we're going to get to 1.5 by 2036. We're going to get to 2 degrees by 2063. So it shows that we really have to do something significant. Some people call this the climate emergency. It puts a timeline on decarbonization. Unlike other past energy transitions, there was no particular urgency. It's just whatever works and whatever is cheaper. Here are 2 graphs that show weather disasters or climate disasters. It's put out by NOAA, US billion-dollar weather and climate events, 1980 to 2021. You see a definite trend up. For example, there were 3 such, this is, by the way, inflation adjusted, 3 events in 1980, something like 22 or 20 in 2021 and 2020. They're all over the country. They're listed here. We know what these are. There were slightly fewer events in 2021, 20 instead of 22, but they were more intense. And the graphs here have some more details. Very interesting correlation between this temperature rise and this increase in billion-dollar disasters. Pretty hard to say it's not due to climate change. How do we do this? Whoops. How do we, I think I can get rid of that. Let's see. Yeah. How do we, well, we started to take decarbonization seriously, and that's what all the previous speakers have talked about. Decarbonize the grid by 2035, economy by 2050. It requires a wholesale transformation of the energy system. Very interestingly, in May of last year, IEA came out with what was the first scenario for decarbonizing the global economy by 2050, starting in 2020. And you see here the various sectors, how they need to be decarbonized. Looks pretty easy on this graph. Everything goes smoothly down to 0 at 2050, but then you start looking at where some of the landmarks are. So you see how aggressive it is. So for example, by 2030, we have to have solar and wind additions that are 4 times what we did in 2020. And 2020 was a record year. And we have to do that every year annually from 2030 to 2050. That is a big ask. If you look at 2035, 100% of personal car sales have to be electric. And this is, we might be able to do that. But 50% of heavy truck sales have to be electric. That's going to be very, very heavy lift for that. And even with all of this, when we get to 2050, at least in this scenario, the prediction was that we would not be able to decarbonize completely. We'd have to capture carbon from the atmosphere, and the amount we would have to capture total by 2050, 7.6 gigatons total captured. That also is a heavy lift. IEA pointed out that we have the technology for some of these things, the commercial technology. We have grid storage, lithium ion. We have solar and wind. We can electrify our buildings if we wish to do it. We can certainly electrify personal cars. And that looks like it would even be cost effective. The question is, can you roll it out fast enough? But in other sectors, we don't have the commercial technology. And they pointed out heavy duty industry and transportation, agriculture, land use, and forestry. So we got to innovate that, and we don't know how to do that yet. So they pointed out 3 areas: advanced batteries. This corresponds very well with the Earthshot in long duration storage that Eric was talking about. Green hydrogen, another Earthshot, and direct air capture, a third, the most recent Earthshot. So the Earth shots of DOE very much, I think, reinforce this, this report and its conclusions. Talking about transportation, lithium ion and passenger EVs can solve about half of the clean energy challenge. And this is from a different IEA report. But you see in this scenario, it's how you might decarbonize. It doesn't do it by 2050, as you see here. So perhaps we need to do something else. But the point of this graph is that passenger cars are about half of the CO2 emissions. And if you're going to do the other half, you need some different technologies. So long haul trucks, rail, marine shipping, aviation, and these things take high energy density. What are the options? Well, you could have high energy density batteries, lithium oxygen and lithium sulfur could be in that category. You need, as we said earlier, 2 to 3 times what lithium ion can do. Might be fuel cells. A lot of people are looking at that. Might be a carbon-free chemical energy carrier that you can combust. Could be, for example, green hydrogen, could be ammonia. They get a lot of attention. They each have their downsides. Or it might be some new chemical energy carrier that we don't know what it is yet. Remains to be discovered. One of the challenges, many-day discharge storage, and Eric talked about this, stabilize a renewable grid against 10 consecutive days of cloudy or calm weather. This is another thing that lithium ion simply can't do. It can discharge at full power for about 4 to 5 hours, maybe 6 hours, but not more. And there are inherent reasons why it can't. The basic reason is it's too expensive, as Eric pointed out. You can always buy another lithium ion battery and get another 4 to 5 hours out of it. So then you've got 10. But that doubles the cost, and the cost already is way too high to be practical for that. So you could go to flow batteries. One opportunity is organic flow batteries, and I put down here monomers, oligomers, and polymers, which now go by the new, relatively new word redox MERS. The advantage here, broad design space. You can think of a carbon ring and a benzene ring, and you can hang a different pendant molecule off of every one of those carbon atoms. Doesn't have to be the same, 6 different ones if you wish. And that gives you a lot of design flexibility. So there's a lot of space here to work, and that's what this diagram refers to. Another very interesting development is Form Energy, which was spun out by Jay Caesar in 2017. Got enormously successful at attracting venture funding, more than $360 million till now. And here are some of the funders. They discovered, using that funding, an iron oxygen battery that can discharge at full power for 4 days. So not 10, but way better than lithium ion. And in fact, in the long duration battery space, I would say that this startup is the leader, or certainly one of the leaders. There's another concern, and that is US manufacturing of batteries and EVs. It's at risk. So if you look at this chart, it's battery manufacturing by location from 2008 and projected out to 2025 or 6 here. And you see the rise of China from about 2010 on. And it is by now the dominant player in lithium ion battery manufacturing. Europe recognized, and the US recognized the challenge, didn't do a lot about it. I think Europe is starting to pick up now, and so is the US at a slower pace. Why is it important? As we said earlier, the battery is about maybe 30% of the cost of an EV. So it's critical for EV manufacturing as well. Here's a diagram that shows where in the world the supply chain for lithium ion batteries comes from. It's pretty much an international supply chain, although China has worked over part of this rise, worked over the last 10 years to dominate, let's say, the supply chain. So although they don't have all the materials within China, they've invested heavily in the foreign sources. And they've done a lot with refining battery materials. So kind of an amazing number, about 80% of the battery materials are refined in China, and the world depends on that refining capability. Big demand, it's clear if this chart, on this chart, we're somewhere around 3% of the mark of the, of 100% of the demand. We have to get to 90%, 30 times increase by 2050. That is a huge market. Everybody wants to maintain, Europe and the US included, their automotive sectors, and that means they have to turn to EVs, and you have to manufacture batteries domestically. It does not, they're too big and heavy to ship over the ocean. So remarkably, the private sector is already on board. So this happened just after COP26 last year, but General Motors, Ford, Volvo, Mercedes-Benz, everyone you see listed here, 24 fleet operators pledged, it's a pledge, to end gasoline and diesel powered sales by 2040. So this is without a lot of government sort of pressure, either sticks or incentives. And it's great to see that the private sector recognizes the need. Interestingly, they chose 2040 as their target for completely getting rid of gasoline powered cars. That's about the same time scale that it takes to develop the next generation battery. So if you want to look for a lithium oxygen battery or a lithium sulfur battery, some other battery, a flow battery, expect it's going to take 20 years to get to the commercial product. And that means that, you know, this is one solution to the battery manufacturing challenge. The other one is go for the next generation and keep the manufacturing capability, let's say in Europe or in the States. And I think that second option deserves maybe as much attention strategically as the first. A little bit about gaps in the energy storage landscape. So what are the applications? And what are the shortcomings? Where do we fall short? Well, probably we fall short most in the supply chain. So what we need is an inexpensive, earth-abundant domestic supply chain. And that is not what we have with lithium-ion. It's an international supply chain. Some of the elements and minerals are in limited supply, and they're not earth-abundant, and certainly not inexpensive. So this is kind of the antithesis of lithium-ion. But that may be the top priority for looking for the next generation battery, as Form Energy and others have pursued. We need many-day discharge storage. We've talked about that. Lithium-ion can't do it. We need high energy density storage for long-haul trucks, rail, shipping, aviation. And we need local storage for hospitals, fire departments, some commercial buildings, and some microgrids. The must-run applications typically backed up by diesel generators now, and that's got to go off. So here are four kind of applications gaps. There's another gap. There's a basic science gap. We need to be able to design the battery, as we say in JCESR, from the bottom up at the atomic and molecular level, and be sure when we make the design that we're going to hit the transformative performance metrics that we need to hit, like many-day discharge or high energy density, or even supply chain constraints. So this being able to do it, not trial and error, but by intentional design at the atomic and molecular level, has always been a signature goal, strategic goal of JCESR, and that it would be a transformation of the battery sector. It's mostly done by trial and error. And once you find out that it works, sort of lose interest in why it works, you just start producing it. So again, the opportunities, it's next generation batteries, fuel cells, this generation or next generation, and certainly next generation chemical energy carriers, which might be hydrogen, ammonia, or something else. I think very important to look at the whole system, upstream and downstream, for energy storage. We talked about the supply chain that can limit the cost and the production rate, ramp up rate of next generation batteries. Of course, there's the technical batteries that you need here and the applications. And there are many applications emerging. It's no longer one size fits all. You might hope it would be lithium ion, but it's clear that won't be the case. So we need to design for the battery. I think I won't talk, well, I'll quickly show this. One of the things that's on track in prep is artificial intelligence and robotic synthesis for materials discovery, and its composition, its structure, and its performance metrics that you want at the top, usually more than one. Too complicated for the typical Edisonian approach, and you need to use artificial intelligence for that. So with that, thank you. I really look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, George. Appreciated that. Looks like you provide a very good overview of the magnitude of the challenge is in front of us, kind of how much we have to add to kind of renewable energy and batteries into the system, but also you provided some perspective of how we can move forward, especially with basic sensors kind of designed from the bottom up. That kind of definitely be people who are researchers, scientists, and engineers love that. So I'd like to get into, I'm sure there are lots of questions from people, get into some question and answers, kind of this start dialogue. And I think I'm hoping that the audience also send their questions as we talk, and also encourage the speakers to provide questions to each other too. If well, I won't be only the person who asked the questions, or you guys also have, if you've seen anything that you can ask each others. One question I think want to start for everybody basically is we see a lot of challenges, but one question is, what's the one major challenge that each one of you see, and what's the priority to solve that kind of and for facing energy storage? So the question is that what is the one major challenge, one priority to address that for energy storage? So Eric, if I may start with you, that would be great. And then we go around the order of the speakers, but then we can mix it up. So.
Sure. I'm going to highlight one of the things that George just mentioned as the major challenge, which is the introduction of more deliberate scientific discovery methods earlier and earlier into the development cycle. I think one of the things that that is really going to be needed to bring the solutions we need on the timeline we need is really propagating what the end user needs all the way back to the way we narrow down what kinds of materials and component level innovations will be needed. And the sooner we can do that, I think the faster we'll be able to actually commercialize useful and cost beneficial technologies.
Thanks. Jen, your perspective of the one major challenge. I know it's kind of challenging to ask that, but I mean, yeah, it's kind of, and how do you see that being addressed at NREL, if may I ask?
Yeah, I think picking up, Eric, on kind of what you were talking about, the speed is, I think, such a big challenge. Everything is changing so quickly. And I think you all heard today that when we consider the wide range of needs and requirements that have to be met, that hitting that, right? We don't want to move too fast and have something that we can't see as sustainable and long-term decarbonized energy storage solutions. We can't move too slow and wait for the things to maybe progress like the way they did a decade or so ago. So I think it's the speed. And then for us at NREL, I think part of our role in addressing that speed, how do we accelerate some of the innovation and solutions into the marketplace, our role is to help bridge a little bit of that gap, because we get to see the basic science activities and the advances on, let's say, the material side, and we also are building those partnerships and relying on activities and understanding the industry side. So how can we bridge some of those gaps between early stage science and the marketplace? I think that's a role for NREL and our national lab partners to help play.
Great. Erin, how about you? What do you see from utilities perspective? One biggest challenge that you face, and how are you going to balance that?
To narrow it down to one, but so I'm going to say one that encompasses many things, and it's going to be that we need more data. And so, the data to inform our modeling, both, from a now project basis to modeling out in the future. Do we have the right inputs and the data that, those models are going to be accurate, and we can understand how storage can be used now in the future? It's going to be important for looking at these emerging technologies in that demonstration. Do we have the data? Can we share the data so that each utility doesn't have to demonstrate each technology, but that they can leverage and learn from how others have tested? It can, data on the safety. There's a lot of information out there on large-scale fire testing that's required by codes and standards, but if that's not shared, or it's held confidential and within a specific project basis, how can we make sure we're creating the solution, the safety systems, and integrating them in a way that the utilities and other owners feel comfortable with the risk? So I think underlying, if we can continue to share data and improve our models, and then we can help drive forward.
Thank you, Erin. Esther, how about you? What do you think? You've been doing it for a while, so it's kind of that would be great to kind of set your perspective.
It's hard to narrow it to one, but I really liked what Erin shared about data, contextualizing the data so that it can tell you the right story and you can start making meaningful decisions, because we've made decisions in a silo, and those consequences are still, I won't say they're haunting us, but they're affecting us. So how do we contextualize the data so that we can implement the right decisions and focus on, because contextualizing the data will affect our decision making and will make us more resilient, because we're prioritizing the true priorities and not what each individual feels is a priority.
Great. George?
I get the advantage of having had a little more time to think about it since I've last. But I will say I have too. But to me, the most important challenge is designing the energy storage mechanism or carrier to the application. So we now have basically one commercial technology. It's lithium ion. It's remarkably versatile and clearly the best battery we've ever had. But there's certain things that it can't do that absolutely need to be done in order to decarbonize the economy. So I think we need other solutions. It could be another battery. It could be a chemical energy storage carrier. And hydrogen seems to have some of the things we need. It's really promising, although there are some downsides. So that's the first thing that I think is important. The second one is to try a lot of stuff. And Eric was talking about this, the new demonstrations that need to be made. This is what happened with lithium ion on the electricity grid. Everybody was looking at that South Australia big installation, biggest one at that time. And after a year, they were confident that, yeah, it does work. And boy, did that spur a lot more deployment. So we need to, I think, obviously, check stuff out, and we need pilot plants, and we need to let our regulators try a few things. Sometimes that's a restriction, but that would be my feeling.
Thanks. Maybe I'll ask later on what was your second one, but I think since the topic of our today is basically integration of energy storage and kind of how some of the two can be bigger than the one. What does integration bring to the technology from your perspective that cannot see by itself? So Jen, I'll start with you.
Yeah.
You mentioned that somewhat, but I think I like you to kind of to hone on kind of the integration part of between the energy storage technologies.
Yeah, my first thought is balance. It brings us balance. We've got competing demands, we've got increasing demands, and we have a number of solution sets. And I don't know about you all, but I don't know the right one. I have ideas on things that can work, right? But I don't know the 20 years from now that this is going to be the thing. And so I think it gives us balance. And the balance then, if I compare this to the other challenges that the panel talked about just on the previous question, if we have balance, if we can develop a system and utilize energy storage to help achieve that balance, that can get pushed and pulled at different points, whether it's in response to a catastrophic event, or it's in response to a really hot day and that we're getting more of them. And it's or it's in response to just more people having things, devices that can be controlled to help optimize systems. That balance, I think, is really key.
Thank you. Aaron, what do you think? Kind of as a utility, do you see combining energy storage or integrating them, hybridizing them? What value do you see in them?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value, and I think, to build off of what Jen just said, I think that one of the keys to achieving that balance and really fully utilizing the systems, whatever they may be, to their full potential is going to be control. And so really understanding how we can operate these systems based on their particular characteristics, based on the needs of the grid, balancing customer needs or customer resilience with, utility services that they're providing at the larger scale level. And I think that controls will help to enable that balance and, a single system, aggregated system. We're going to have to rely quite a bit on that as the types of technologies and the needs grow over time.
Great, thanks. Esther, you talked about your behind the meter, and looks like that one definitely has a hybridization in there. So you want to speak to that, please?
Sure. So for us, the question of integration is realizing that nothing can happen in a silo. So we've noticed that with behind the meter storage, with that thermal energy storage system, we've leveraged data, we've leveraged our partners, and we've been able to do more. So we know that we're able to do more, not only because we're leveraging different pieces and different skill sets, but we're bringing those conflicting and sometimes contradicting expectations or demands to the table and really evaluating, similar to what Jen was saying, on a balanced scale, so that you're not tipping the scale one way or the other, but you're really meeting the airport's mission critical facilities and critical needs, as well as the FAA's needs, and then the overall national airspace system, so that we can meet our mandate. What we're required to do is provide safe and efficient aircraft operations for people. And that reminded me, as you were talking, and actually Aaron and Jen, as they were talking, it made me think about the Integrated Operations Center at the airport, which essentially brought cross-functional teams into one platform, one room, where we can all share information in real time and understand how is the airport system operating. And we understand how the airport is operating within, so we have airport personnel, airline personnel, TSA, police, DPS, and then we have community partners. And when we integrated those different structures, we realized that it allowed the airport to be even more effective. And we've been able to grow our operations, where our initial growth at DFW Airport for the past maybe 10 years before 2018 was at about 1.2%. Our annual growth now is at about 3.6%. And even in COVID, we've been able to bounce back faster than any airport in the world. And that is through integration. So having experienced the power of integration on the operations side, we know for sure that if we integrate our energy portfolio, we'll be able to get more out of it.
Great, thank you. George, I'm sure you have a perspective on that too.
Well, it's a great question. And here's my comment. Integration allows you to bring more than one solution to a problem when it exists. And I'll give you a couple of examples. If you look at our energy system now, it's electricity, which is maybe the most versatile. It does a lot for us, but not everything. It's oil, which is transportation until now, the advent of EVs. And it's coal and gas, which powers heavy industry. And they're pretty separate. So you can't use coal and gas for transportation, at least we don't, and so on. What I think we look for, the ideal, is to have an integrated energy system with a chemical energy carrier that is not fossil, and that takes coal and gas off the table. But maybe it's hydrogen, maybe it's ammonia, maybe it's something else we haven't discovered yet, which you can interchange with electricity whenever you like, back and forth, and that you can also burn to produce a lot of heat. So that brings thermal, electricity, electrochemical, chemical, all together in one coupled or integrated system. It's much more powerful and much more flexible and much more versatile than the system that we have now. And if we're redesigning our energy systems, we should look at that. It seems to me that that's not out of reach, and that would be an excellent goal.
Great, thank you. Eric, I mean, you have a lot of different technologies, independent technologies in your portfolio, but how do you and DOE sees the integration part as part of what part, how much of the portfolio you need to be, and what's your perspective on that?
Well, I would flip what George just said in terms of many solutions to a given problem, and say another aspect of the benefits of integration is being able to adapt to many different problems. I think one of the challenges that we're facing is that the horizon for clarity in how a given technology would fare in the marketplace is pretty short. Like if you try to make market projections past 3 to 5 years, you are essentially playing a scenario game. You're not really doing much better than guessing. And so, you know, if all the other people on this call are actually successful in accelerating the pace of innovations, we really have to be prepared for an environment where the needs of the system will be changing, you know, turning over every 5 years or even faster. And I think what integration gives you is this optionality of being able to reconfigure your system or readapt your technology to the changing requirements of a system that will always be evolving. And I think doing that will give people a lot more confidence in putting something in the ground because they know it can be used many different ways.
Thanks.
Ahmad, if I could
Sure.
hop in, Eric, I think there is something there that we've been thinking about, and I wonder if Aaron and Esther from kind of the end user side could comment, but there's a risk, right? There's a really big risk about not knowing what 5 years looks like and 10 years looks like. And I think some of what you just talked about was how can we lower the risk and still be dynamic or adaptable is the word that you used. I was wondering, Aaron and Esther, if you had some ideas on the challenges with the risk, especially you must be doing 5-year and 10-year kind of plans, right?
Yeah, I can talk to that. And speaking about, you know, kind of near-term risk, looking at even, battery storage technology and the need for that. It's great because it's flexible. It can be deployed fairly quickly. So if the need changes, can you pick it up and move it? And so we're starting to look at transportable and mobile systems and using that as a tool in your kit for planning. Maybe it's seasonal, maybe it's just to meet a deferral need for a specific time, but yeah, definitely needing to incorporate that into distribution and transmission planning to see how, if the assets are flexible, how they can be used to support those needs and how adaptable they can be and what time scales you need to make these decisions on.
And on our end, risk is one of the critical pillars that confronts us, right? As an airport, you also deal with the risk aversiveness of leadership and of people in general, because the consequences could be really, really bad. So with that, over the past few years, I've been working at DFW. What has been so interesting is being able to leverage technology to understand those risks, to leverage partnerships with other agencies, other organizations, small companies out of Silicon Valley, to leverage partnerships with DOE and NREL and say, okay, let's apply digital twin technology, something that hasn't been applied at an airport, and try to implement these policies and these things or infrastructure decisions or changes that we're trying to implement within a virtual environment to understand what are the consequences on the airport system, and how do we, because once we have that understanding of the implications of policies, decisions, disruptive technologies, then when we start applying them on the ground, we've applied some level of de-risking such that we have a better understanding and we're better positioned to implement those decisions and those solutions in the field. So you probably know that DFW has worked with NREL on a mobility digital twin, and that has informed and is still informing our mobility infrastructure decisions, as well as how we even start our policies on changing the fleet mix of our vehicles. And then we've started working on a building digital twin, and now are starting to formulate a proposal on an airside and airspace digital twin model, so that we can really explore these scenarios and leverage supercomputing powers of organizations such as NREL.
Can I jump in with a comment, Ahmad?
Sure.
Esther, it's really based on your talking about a digital twin. It's a really powerful opportunity to test things out on the computer before you do them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is one of the challenges we face with the energy system. We're not quite sure what's going to work and what won't work, and things will change in 5 years. So I think it's a great concept. And to put it into airport sort of context is another great opportunity, because there are a lot of interacting pieces there. I can tell you that Argonne, actually, we've been told by DOE to decarbonize the laboratory by a certain date. And one of the first things we did was to start a digital twin program. It's a bottom-up analysis of how do the various pieces of the laboratory interact.
Mm-hmm.
Remarkably, we need a lot of electricity because of the big computers we have, because of the big advanced photon source, the synchrotron, that requires a lot of power. And it's a little bit different from most sectors of society. So a digital twin is really helpful to foresee some of these problems.
Great. Any other comments? Kind of to Jen's question. Oh, if not, I go to some of the questions that we have. One of them basically is to Esther, but also can be applicable to kind of get perspective of that. First of all, congratulations to Esther to decouple economy from ecology as separate dimensions of the whole. So I think, and can you report on the challenges and share advice on establishing this approach in other organizations?
So thank you for the congratulatory message. And So what we've been doing is decoupling our growth as an airport from negative impacts. And those negative impacts are negative impacts on the community, on the environment, balancing technology and nature. And the way we've been able, of course, there's been challenges from, things like acceptance within the organization, the culture. That's one of the biggest challenges that we've had to work with. Engaging leadership has been surprisingly one of the easiest things. We've been blessed with a group of leaders that are innovative, that want you to pursue the tough things and present solutions to them. But we've been confronted with challenges, including access to data. Some of our partners don't want to share data. So that had made the process of trying to decouple the growth and negative impacts even more difficult. We've, of course, been confronted with economic challenges. Some of these costs, some of these technologies and these solutions that we try to implement still come at a cost premium, but we've also been able to partner with federal and state agencies and apply for grant programs that have allowed us to pursue opportunities. And I think the other thing that we have faced that is a challenge is maybe the policy landscape is lagging, which I mentioned when I was speaking earlier. Because of that lag in policy, it's also difficult to find people to partner with. So you end up being an early adopter and a pioneer, which we're not afraid of, but it just makes you the only one going at something for the most part. And it's exciting to find partners, which I really appreciate my leadership and the people I work with at DFW, because when we notice that we're not getting as many partners within the industry, they ventured out and started partnering with national labs and partnering with companies in Silicon Valley that had nothing to do with airports. So for example, when we started building our digital twin, the airport is 48 years old and we don't have BIM models for the airport. And we had to try and find, okay, there's technology that's been applied there. Can we try to apply it at the airport so that we can scan and collect LiDAR point cloud data and start building BIM models and then go into building a digital twin. It is a challenge, but it can be done. So you always have to think outside the box. And the solution is not within most of the time. It's found in those partnerships with diverse thought processes that come to the table.
Thank you. I think just coming back to Erin, to you, and kind of bit. Utilities kind of much more kind of concerned about regulations and kind of commissions and kind of economics. How do you see it going, and kind of these lessons get kind of, or the advice or insight that kind of Esther mentioned? How can it help the utilities kind of move in that direction?
Yeah, I think utilities, so they're coming at it from different angles. Some are looking to solve a particular need, some are being mandated, and so they're trying to find the best location to deploy storage. So there's different perspectives and motivations for deploying storage. So understanding that and then building out, tools that can help with that evaluation and understanding all those different aspects to make those informed decisions. But definitely, I think that the sharing of information and the transparency around how that process works is helpful to making those cases.
Yeah. Eric, do you see that kind of as a model of that Dallas-Fort Worth to be something that kind of, when you implementing your funding, grants, those kind of things, that's something that you're looking for and kind of encouraging, and how does it help?
Yeah, I think it's really great that, it's a great model for an entity like DFW Airport to have a very clear understanding of what their technical needs are and where they're going in the future. I think the challenge for other entities is really the scalability. If you're looking at a smaller entity that may not have sort of the institutional resources, or as Esther mentioned, the supportive leadership who, willing to try new things, then, you have an uphill battle on multiple fronts to get the analysis to find what new solutions may be viable, and to then convince the decision makers to try something different. I think that's something DOE recognizes very clearly. And what I'm hopeful is that we'll be able to use the resources we've been given to help more decision makers, more entities be champions for the newer, cleaner, less, smaller footprint solutions for whatever their application is.
Great. George or Jen, do you have any kind of any perspective on that? I mean, Argonne and Emerald probably also, they kind of in the midst of these kind of changes, decisions, so not different than other organizations in some way, even we are research focused.
Jen, you want to answer first?
I was going to give you the first chance, George. I can hop in. I was thinking about this because as a research lab, I think our focus first is on technology advancement and R&D, right? That's where we first sit. But this conversation has really emphasized how important the other pieces are, the people part, the social part, the culture part, and how important that is. Because if we lose track of that, again, we could have the best, whatchamacallit, whatever it is, and it still doesn't matter. And I think that's really important as a research organization, that we need to be just as much a part of that kind of cultural shift as other organizations are, so that we can keep those requirements in mind that go beyond maybe our technical set of durability and cost metrics maybe that we're most comfortable with, and that's where we operate the most. So I think it's just a challenge for us to keep pushing in that and understanding the cultural part, the societal, the people aspect of how that influence whether we're successful in our research mission or not.
Yeah, I would second those comments, actually, Jen and everyone, that it's an unusual situation right now. So climate change it's very important. I think people are realizing that more and more, although we still have a ways to go with perception. And there's a timeline. So it's 2050 or 2035, or name your favorite timeline. That's unusual. We haven't had to make such a big transformation, basically of the entire economy, with a timeline in mind. And climate change doesn't ask us, is it convenient? Do you have the technology? It's going to march ahead, do what it needs to do. And we're not quite sure what it will do. We don't know how climate change is going to unfold exactly, except that it's going to get worse and it's going to cost us. So it pays us to handle the problem early and put our solutions out there, check them out. So I guess my comment would be, it's a cultural challenge to get people to I mean, sort of all sectors, to recognize that we have to go fast. And there is very correctly a cultural sort of, I think, resistance to change. If we've got it working now, why should we change it? If it isn't broke, don't fix it. And it isn't quite broke yet. Probably will be if in 10 years. And that's something that I think it's really hard for us to accept. So we need to do the talking. We need to, I think labs like Emerald and Argonne, all the other ones, need to be the thought leaders on this and help deliver the solutions, before it gets, let's say, too bad.
Yep, thank you. The next question I like to, looks like you want to switch to manufacturing. And the question is that the comment is that since the current manufacturing systems are defined and being installed at very high rate, what is the position of the research environment when they have to align the research to existing manufacturing assets? So it's a kind of the question is that we want to move fast, but if the existing assets are already set to that certain positions, how do we adjust to that, and how what are the challenges to that, kind of how we address that? So since this is a research thing, maybe Eric, I'll start with you because you see a lot of research going on, and kind of maybe this question comes up all the time.
Yeah, the question of how to move from point A to where we are now to B is complicated. I think you try to answer that on multiple fronts, right? So for example, some of the sodium battery work is designed to be somewhat of a drop-in replacement for lithium. Like hopefully you can use some of the same roll-to-roll or cell pack manufacturing devices. I think you try to look for layers of abstraction where you can get to common parts as soon as possible. So certainly power electronics, is a major cost component, and to the extent that you can make that translatable across chemistries from what you're doing today, or in fact make it multiple use, right? Solar batteries, make it bidirectional so it supports EVs too. Like that gives you that optionality to use the same manufacturing equipment and technologies for multiple things. And I think one of the things that, again, going back to the optionality argument, while I recognize that there are investments that are going in today that will have a useful life, I do want to stress that 2035 or 2050 is not it's not a destination, right? It's not we get there and then we stop innovating, right? There will continue to be innovations happening like throughout this timeline. And so we need to be recognizing that everything we put into the ground today will need to have some kind of decommissioning or reconversion strategy because the needs will change, the technologies will improve. And so being aware of that upfront, I think will help alleviate some of the, help promote some of the least regrets sort of investment strategies. Go for it.
Anyone else? Kind of George, any perspective on that?
I mean, I would certainly agree with Eric's comments and maybe add something he suggested, but amplified a little bit, and that's stranded assets. So we're seeing a lot of potentially stranded assets now, which is the economy that we already have. Think of all the fossil fuel things that we may have to retire before their natural end of life. But that goes for things we're going to put in place. So do we want to put something in place that we know will be a bridge to something else, but may have to be withdrawn before its natural life is over? And that's, of course, expensive economically. And I think that's a problem we really don't know how to address. You can go slow and see if it works. This classic example is the grid in Tesla in South Australia, as I was saying earlier. And that's pretty effective to know that indeed it will work. There's nothing wrong with it. But the question beyond that is, when will it be replaced by something better? And I think grid energy storage has that character right now. So lithium ion can do some of the things intraday and extended to evening, can't stabilize against 10 consecutive days, just can't. What are you going to put in place and how long would that last? Well, we might think about coming back to chemical energy storage, something that really works well, and we know it works well. The only problem is that it has carbon in it and emits carbon dioxide. So to that extent, maybe that's not quite so risky. If we can find the ideal molecule, material that stores energy chemically and is combustible and is interchangeable with electricity, but doesn't emit carbon dioxide, well, that might be a solvable problem. And it's pretty sure that that would work for a long time.
Aaron, probably this question about kind of existing assets versus kind of the cost of future technologies comes up a lot with your constituents, utilities, how do you how do they think about it? How do you guys see that to resolve now versus future?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to address both because we do need the assets now. We were in R&D, but now we're seeing that they're being deployed for commercial applications. They need to provide that reliability or resilience to the grid. And so we have to address both of those and understand really the technology now to understand, we know some of the gaps, duration, costs, and things like that, but we need to fully understand how the systems operate, what their full life cycle actually looks like, so that we can plan and understand, when the next technology will be needed, what deficiencies does it need to cover from the previous, how can we leverage multiple different technologies to provide all the different uses. So I think it's a mixture, and looking at at technology moving forward, we really need to start demonstrating in the nearer term for these larger systems to have that confidence in, and it's like a risk mitigation perspective. How reliable are these new technologies going to be? Are they going to be provide that resilience that they need? And so starting to test them at a small scale now, so that we can be ready in the future. So definitely looking now and in the future so that we can be prepared.
Thanks. Esther, probably you guys made decisions on procurement, by technology A or B, some it more mature than the other ones. How did you in this regard look at that?
So that's a tough question, because that's something that we're confronted with on mostly a weekly basis, probably. So we've developed different emerging technology frameworks based on our lessons that we've learned from implementing proofs of concept or proof of concept projects on the airport. Usually before we deploy anything at the airport, we have an innovation department that partners with us, and we try to implement a proof of concept project so that we understand. And the purpose of it is really just to learn. So and it goes back to me hammering the idea of a culture that is there for innovation, a culture of innovation. And then with sustainability at our core, we don't want sunk costs, we don't want stranded assets. So we also want to evaluate opportunities to reuse and apply that cradle to cradle mentality and say, okay, how do we leverage what we have now? We know we have aging infrastructure. Can we retrofit and renovate so that this infrastructure is geared to survive another 40, 50 years? As I said earlier, DFW is 48 years old. We went through the first major renovation of our terminals in 2010. And based on that renovation, we anticipate getting another 30 years. We're doing the same thing with our airfield, but really what goes into play is we sit down with the cross-functional team and a few or most of our thought leaders really, and go through the uncomfortable process of running through these scenarios. And then where possible, we leverage the technologies that are out there to try and even understand what the implications are if we deploy those solutions on the airport.
Thanks. And Jen, I think the question of manufacturing assets and the technology that's coming down the stream, how does analysis and the validation of the using assets of R&D assets would help answer those questions in your mind?
Yeah, I was thinking Maggie, who kicked us off earlier today, I'm sorry she couldn't participate in this part of the conversation, especially. She's one of the keys in understanding supply chain implications. And I was just reading an article earlier today about cobalt mining in the US, and we've got these technologies that are going to push manufacturing. I think we have a drive. I think, Eric, I'm thinking about a DOE goal, top 5 of decarbonizing industry too, right? And the manufacturing side. So as we can push more on the opportunity for decarbonizing our manufacturing streams and understanding the supply chain, Esther, as you mentioned, the cradle to cradle kind of opportunities. I think that just helps us get a better understanding and really push on how we're going to get to not the destination of 2035 or 2050 with a decarbonized grid, but maybe our checkpoint or something like that that we can hit. So I think the analysis really helps set some of the pathways in understanding the manufacturing piece. And at least for me, one of the compelling and exciting research drivers here is that I'm not as well versed in understanding supply chain and the manufacturing implications and the societal implications. You know, my background, I kind of understood this tiny little part, and everything that we've talked about today is how do we take the tiny little part that we're understanding, whether it be hydrogen or electrochemical, molecular, mechanical storage technologies, and fit them into a system. Because if we can't do that, we aren't going to hit our decarbonization goals. We won't hit it if we don't consider the manufacturing all the way to the societal part of requirements for these technologies.
Very good point. I think we have about 5 minutes or 6 minutes left before we close. Just want to see whether you have each of you have questions for each other, or kind of some topic that you want to hear, and throw it in there kind of as an open dialogue. I would really appreciate that, kind of so that it wasn't me that thinking about these things and these questions. So it's open for now. George?
Can I just throw something on the table and see what the other panelists think about the value of startups? So we have lots of very entrenched industries. And as I was mentioning, in transportation, they've seen the light and made the pledge. Of course, haven't quite got there yet, but that takes time. But the startups seem to me to be a huge advantage because they can try new things. They're usually fixed on one goal, staying alive, and that means making their technology work. Whereas some of the established corporations have many opportunities, and the ones that are a little too risky or involve a little bit too much change, they just may not touch. So the startups look to me like an asset that we ought to be emphasizing in some way. Don't ask me how, I haven't thought about that, but some way to encourage that, that trend.
Any takers?
I can chime in. It's not really my area of focus, but EPRI has an Incubate Energy Labs where they have startup pitches and they help the startups and coach them into, from a utility perspective, what the needs are, how to address those customers, and so through that they can they make their pitches and with the ultimate goal of demonstrating their technology. And so I think those are good ways for getting them to understand that particular customer's perspective, so that they can tailor their solutions to meet the need if that's their customer. And so I think it's a great opportunity, and we're working with some storage companies and testing their product out at SolarTech in Denver. And so good opportunities to work with those. And we also just do general technology scouting for awareness of what progress is being made in the industry, and what particular things to look out for, because it's sort of hard to navigate through all the different technologies and what they're saying about X, Y, or Z, safety, reliability, cost, and like how does that factor in to the bigger picture. So again, not my area, but I think it is a focus for EPRI.
Esther or Eric?
I think of the point on that George, you had mentioned earlier about the decarbonization and the timeline. Basically, we spend $800 billion a year on liquid fuels in the U.S. economy. So oil, natural gas, and some kerosene and stuff. And all of that's going to go somewhere else, right? And so in this period of change, there is a lot of room for opening for a new company to come in and say, I can get you delivered energy faster, cheaper, more reliably than the incumbent in a way that's low carbon. So I think it's really exciting to watch, and I almost think it's a necessity that you would have a different kind of business or a different business model to really explore those fully.
Great point. I'll just point out, I'll say one word, Tesla.
Yep, change the,
George,
go ahead.
sorry, Ahmad. I was just thinking the one piece that we didn't talk too much about are the people side of this. And I think we need to push on education and that workforce development. I know that it was kind of sprinkled throughout a little bit. It's something that we, if we're really going to do this big, ambitious energy system transition, we need more and more people to be part of that transition. And so startups are a great place to get people excited and move them into that space. I think partnerships with universities and junior colleges and local governments and kind of tech related activities is also really important. But George, as you were talking about startups, that was the other piece. We just need more people in this, that's part of this transition, that's part of this change that we're trying to work on, right?
Totally agree.
Great. I think we want to have this conversation to be different than from other conferences on energy storage. And I think we achieved that. I think this was a vision from Jen to kind of be different. And I think it was I think we addressed other things that just normal, just technology focus wasn't the piece kind of mentioned about kind of technology is one thing, but bringing it to actually fruition takes a lot of more than that. So people and culture and you name it. So before that, okay, we're going to close today and kind of look for tomorrow. Thanks, Rebecca, for putting the next day emerging technologies and future energy storage initiatives. We're going to have a good discussions with other great speakers and panel members. So I hope that everybody can participate. And with that, I would like to thank every one of the speakers and participants. And I think, I hope that you have a good day. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
This was great.
Thanks, Ahmad. Thank you to the panelists and the attendees. Bye-bye,
Yeah.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thanks. Bye-bye.